All right, so we start out with the obvious. Tell us your name and where you were born and when you were born and all that good stuff.
Pamela Chapman. I was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1948. I was the third of 6 children. When I was born, we lived in East Orange, New Jersey, in a 2-bedroom apartment. And there were my 2 older brothers had bunk beds, and I had a bed in one room. Then my brother Arthur was born, and he was in a crib in my parents' room. And when David was born, he was in a crib in the dining room. And I think that was probably the impetus to move. So we did move. We went to West Orange, and we rented a huge house there. So there was room for everybody. And then we ultimately moved to Neptune, New Jersey. And then my brother Greg was born when we were in Neptune. And, you know, in Neptune, it was a very family-oriented area. Everybody had tons of kids. And my mother was squelching her feminist roots to try to be a homemaker, you know, riding around, driving us everywhere, being involved in everything. You know, it was a pretty normal, crazy, unstructured childhood.
So Catholic?
We were raised Catholic, and I think probably to this day, there are a few remaining practicing. I am not one of them. Though my dad used to say, you never get the smell of incense out of your nostrils, and he had something there, because, you know, the teaching remains, though I don't practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So anything that got you thinking about feminism from observing your mother, or things that happened to you in grade school or high school?
You know, growing up, I used to think that my parents had reverse roles. My mom was huge into sports. She loved it all. Like, I remember on Sundays, my dad would be like, "When's dinner?" And she'd be like, "Wait till halftime," because she'd be watching football. And much later in her life, one day she told me what a great day it was. There was football and golf on TV the same day. So she, though she never played a sport, was so into it. And of course, my brothers all played sports. Being a girl in, you know, the 60s, and there were really no sports, particularly for girls. I was a cheerleader, which is, you know, again, a pretty typical role. And I think I don't think I recognized mother's independence at that point, though. Even though she was in a very traditional role, she was fiercely independent, had been raised that way, you know, just kind of did things her way around and about. So sometime after we moved to Connecticut, and that was the year I graduated from college, we moved to Connecticut, and she got me into a consciousness raising group, big rage in the 70s. And I was in this group with very mixed ages, mixed religions, mixed economic backgrounds, mixed education. And it was really exciting. Like, all of a sudden, I was seeing all these similarities in our lives with these women who were so apparently different from me. And so it was very exciting. And then my mother invited me to a NOW conference. And she said, you know, why don't you come? They're really fun. And so I was like, yeah, okay. And it was in New Jersey. And we went, I remember it was in Atlantic City, because we marched on the boardwalk against the Miss America pageant.
Oh.
And, you know, and I was like kind of shy about the whole thing then. I mean, I was still like, I don't know about this. And we were in a plenary session, huge room, you know, tons and tons of people. And someone was ill, and they said over the loudspeaker, "Is there a doctor available?" And all these women, I mean, there were all these doctors, and I was stunned. And it just struck me that I was surrounded by women who were doing so many things, and they weren't all teachers and nurses and secretaries. You know, they were in every field I could imagine. And it really, I got the bug there. I mean, that night, I think, was the real beginning of my awakening. And, we went to a dance and we went to this, I remember I can't remember her name now, the entertainer, but she sang this song, The First 5 Minutes of Life, where the woman and the husband, I guess, didn't know the gender of the child for 5 minutes, and how there were in those 5 minutes no expectations, nothing, nothing placed on this child. So I was just eating this up. This was it. And I came home and I couldn't shut up about it, which drove my father crazy. And I think my boyfriend at the time wasn't digging it too much. But that got me started. And then I started going places with my mother. I went to other conferences, and then of course we marched. We went to Washington, we went to New York, we marched. I remember in New York, we marched against pornography. And it was so ironic because here we are marching down the streets of New York against pornography, and on the side of the road, and it happened repeatedly, were these men grabbing their crotches and yelling at us. And I thought, isn't this something? It's perfect. So I did that. And then, there were some things locally too. I would march for reproductive rights, and I march, here, there, and everywhere. And, so I just, I think she really got me immersed in it.
Do you remember what got her started?
Well, I do remember a couple of things. A story my mother told about being young. She wanted to go to college, and my grandfather wouldn't send her to college. He sent my uncle, who was a miserable student. He went to college because he was a male. And I think she had the seeds then, but when she got married, she wouldn't let them say obey in the ceremony. So I think it was peeking out in those days, and then, here she was, she had 6 kids, and, it just kind of stuck in a lifestyle that, was I don't think it impacted her love for us one bit, but it was not what she wanted to do or to be. And so I remember I used to babysit for this family, and my mother and the woman were friends. And one time I was there, I was getting ready. I guess my mother was dropping me off and they hadn't gone out yet. She and the other one were sitting on the porch, and I was doing stuff, and I'm overhearing them, and they're talking about the panic every month if they didn't get their period. Oh. The panic of, oh no, is this going to be another? Because my brother Greg was born, my mother was 40 or 41 when Greg was born. It was the first time in 16 years she had all the kids in school, and she got pregnant.
Oh my God.
So, she was right back to being in the, so there were those things. Then my oldest brother, she wanted us to go to college. And my dad, who was a smart man, and, he was so old school. He wanted people to stay home and support the family and do your responsible work. And so when my oldest brother, it was time for him to go to college, my mother took a job, but there were 6 kids. So she took a job at 9 at night, and she worked till 5 in the morning. And she'd come home, get the kids off to school, and try to sleep a little bit. She had to drive my father to the station. She had to pick him up at night. So she, I don't know how she slept, and it went on for years. But she was working at a trucking company, doing some sort of, I don't know what they were doing at night, some financial stuff. Mm-hmm. And then she got a job at, it was Earl Ammunition Depot. It was with the government. And that was during the day, and it was a job she really liked. And she was doing really well. And my father got transferred. So we were to move to Connecticut. And I remember her saying, when we moved to Connecticut, I'm going to get involved in this organization called NOW. This new organization I want to get involved in. I think she felt, I'm giving up all the stuff I've had, I've worked for, and I've gotten, and there's going to be something in this for me. Right. So as soon as we got here, she looked it up, and she got involved. And she was very involved, local and state, and obviously, and then national.
Right. Good for her. So you became a teacher, I believe?
Yeah. So I saw my options as pretty wide open. I was like, secretary, nah. Nurse, nah. I guess I'll be a teacher. I really do, I look back on it and I really do think it was default. It didn't really occur to me to look at other things. And that's the part I don't quite understand, because here I was with this mother who would absolutely, if a job opened as a brain surgeon, she might have said, I can do that. I'll give it a try. I can learn. I, on the other hand, was I was my father's genes in that respect, very timid and, afraid to try anything new, and certainly didn't want to stand out. And, I remember, it's funny, I remember my graduation from college was Kent State, and, all sorts of things erupted, and a lot of kids wore peace signs on their caps or something, armbands. And I didn't want to, upset anyone. So, I didn't do it. And ironically, I kind of upset my mother, because she would have preferred that I had done it. She was looking for somebody to step out of line, and shake things up a bit. And I wasn't a shaker in those days.
So when did you get kind of your own feminist portfolio? When did you
started doing getting involved in Now here, and I started going to conferences and stuff. And I remember going to one where Ellie Smeal was encouraging people to give up their lives for a short period of time and join the efforts to pass the ERA, and how they needed people. And I started thinking, maybe I could try this. My mother was living in Washington. I could go down there. I could, try something. And I spoke to my principal, who was a woman, was marvelous. And she was so encouraging. She was like, absolutely. So it would have been probably 81, I'm guessing. I took a leave of absence. I went in January and I stayed until probably July or August. And I worked at the headquarters for quite a while. For Now, I wrote for the Now Times. I actually had one article published on the front page. I did all sorts of odds and ends. I went to the Hill and did lobbying, or sort of did lobbying, went with other people who were doing lobbying. Mm-hmm. And then I went to North Carolina for their vote. We worked there for, I think, 2 weeks. And then I went to Florida for their vote, where I was just so disgusted by the whole thing there. I remember being in the gallery and we're listening to the testimony of this, and this, I can't even remember who it is now. He gets up and he's like, you women are good, but you're not good enough to stand toe to toe with a foreign enemy. I was like, oh, good God, this is what it's come to. And it was I don't even know whether it was, I don't know whether it was more depressing or more just disgusting. It was a horrible feeling. The Florida experience was a horrible feeling. And then, I came back shortly after that. And then, we were kind of out of time, I guess, on the ERA, though. I guess not, because now it's being reborn. It's like the phoenix, the ashes and all that. And I stayed a little while longer in Washington, and then I came home. And then I got quite involved with the Women's Center here, which was not particularly political, but there was a big focus on empowerment of women.
Could you go back for just a minute for our people who are looking at this to describe a little more that last year of the ERA, and you're in Washington, D.C. How many other people made the same decision you did and came? Did you have any sense of what the campaign looked like?
I do remember that, she was firing people up at these conferences, and this one in particular, she was, people were getting all in a frenzy about this possibility. And I think, I was thinking that I was in such a great position because I could do it. I could afford, I kind of sublet my apartment for 6 months, and I had a place to stay. But I think people were sacrificing a lot more to get involved. It was a very, very exciting and motivating time. I mean, the cause was so embedded, like it seemed so simple. And it was so simple for so long until it came to like this screeching halt. Thank you, Ms. Schlafly. But I think that I was one of many, many young women who were like, yeah, I'm doing this. This is my chance to do something that will have an impact. And even though we didn't pass the ERA, I did feel like it was something that had a tremendous impact in so many different directions, and certainly on me, and others like me who got involved. I mean, it changed our view of the world. And here I was. I felt like I've grown up with a woman who has actually changed the world. She's done things that have changed the world for us. I mean, she was involved in Title IX here in Connecticut, really involved. She was the founder of the Women's Center. She ran an entire year of a hotline for sexual assault off our phone on an answering machine, where she took every call herself. So here I am growing up with this, and now I have this opportunity to do something myself. And it was amazing. It was truly an amazing time, an exciting time. And I remember working for, God, we'd be home, it'd be 10:30 at night, the phone would ring, gotta come to the office, you gotta do a mailing. We go running out, and we do these mailings till 2 a.m. And halfway through they'd say, stop the press, there's a mistake, and we'd start all over. And you never minded. I don't think anybody ever minded. It was just, and everything was now. We ate together, we socialized together, we worked together, we carpooled together. I mean, it was this group of women that you just spent your life with, and God, I loved it.
All right, that's good. No, thank you. That's very helpful. So the Women's Center that your mother had been a founder of. Now you when you get back to Connecticut, you become active there. Is that?
I was an original member of the Women's Center because my mother founded it, and so I was there the first day. I paid my $5, and and it was primarily, it started, she and these other two women started it as a place for women to go. Back in the early 70s, women couldn't even be at a bar in Connecticut. You couldn't stand in a bar. You had to be seated at a table somewhere. So women had nowhere. Men had different things they could do. They could hang out at the bar. So she started this, and it was almost immediate that people started calling for help. And it was help about divorces, and it was help about sexual assault, and it was just help and help and help. And so it really quickly transitioned to kind of a social service agency. I think the first thing I did was I was a volunteer on the hotline, the rape crisis hotline, and I was a volunteer counselor. And then every time I was on the hotline, I got a call, and it started freaking me out, like every time. So I decided to switch off, and I joined the board. I ultimately was on the board for 25 years. I held various offices, and I spent 4 years as president, during which time we bought a building and, and again, there was my mother. A lot of people didn't want to buy a building. They were afraid of buying a building. And she was like, you got to do this. You got to stop being on, at the whim of the people of, the town of Danbury, because right now they're supportive, but what if they're not? And so, but we bought a building, and I did a capital campaign to renovate. And so, while I'm not involved physically anymore, I'm a strong supporter of the Women's Center to this day.
It still goes on. The work goes on.
Oh, endless. It is endless. They do a wonderful education program. And when I was teaching, I got them into the Bethel schools, and then they were spreading out, but I managed to get them into our elementary schools and our middle and high school. And they did, they do with the little kids, they do a good touch, bad touch thing. And they do some puppet work. But the middle school and high school, they talk dating violence, and well, of course now sexual identity. And so, yeah, it was
Fantastic.
and I think that my background was really helpful in my career as well, because I was in a classroom forever. But when I left the classroom, I became an assistant principal at a middle school. And we had kids with a lot of issues. We had a lot of girls sending naked photos of themselves that we tried to work with. We had kids who are not only questioning their identity, but changing their identity. And I was at least somebody who was open to understandings, and had some experience with all different types of people that, so they could have had a lot different people in those positions. And I think it was really helpful.
Yes. So your experience, so that's just an example of how your experience in the women's movement shaped your life, right?
Oh yeah, in so many ways, and I think I recognized that I don't need to be part of a pair. I've never been married. I did have a couple long-term relationships, but I didn't feel that obligation to get married, to fit into that little mold of twosomes that our world is made up of. And and I do believe that without my awakening, I could have very easily said yes on a number of occasions, not because I wanted to, but because I thought I should. And so I think I gained a sense of myself as a capable individual through the women's movement.
What issues were most compelling to you?
Obviously the equal rights, but I was always very driven to help in the area of sexual assault. And I in the old days we called it rape crisis, until we realized that that was a very narrow view of sexual assault. And I think we can, battered women's services, that again, my mother was really right on the front line there, but just situations that were so awful. And I think I think I was driven to things that let people be independent, that help them make those choices to be independent. Because at the center, we dealt with lots of victims of various things. I mean, they women who were just in such bad positions or places, or they felt so helpless. And I think the ability to give somebody even a little bit of hope that this doesn't have to be this way. There are other options for all of us. And, that I think that's been a big push for me.
Right.
And the same thing in the schools. I mean, even as a teacher, and I'd have kids come to me with assorted problems, and it was always, the idea was always to empower them to think about what it was that they wanted. What was the outcome, given the opportunity, what would be the outcome you want for you? Mm-hmm. And just let's take a step aside for a minute from what everybody else wants, and let's see what you want. And then you can think about, can I get this? How do I do this? How do I tell my parents that I'm gay? How do I, I mean, there are all these kids are struggling daily. And, so there was a lot. I think my experience with the women's movement, and particularly my time at Now, gave me a lot of, it gave me a dialogue, for one thing. Right. And it gave me the opportunity to share that with with students.
So it fit together. Are you still an activist at this time?
I think I'm still an activist. I don't do as much. Like, I did a little Black Lives Matter thing here. I would like to have done more, but of course, we're in a pandemic and I'm 73. So I'm like, maybe I'll be an activist from home. But yeah, not as much as I should be, honestly. I mean, I'll admit.
We're all in,
Uh,
all of our activities are curtailed this last year.
well, this year for sure. Yeah. But, this too is going to change. So
yeah. So we look forward to
we're going
that.
to get back there.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful life, a meaningful life, and so happy.
It is. And, I have good friends and I have a good family, even though we can't discuss politics with several of them. My mother called a timeout on that discussion a long time ago. And she said, no more, because you're not changing my mind. I'm not changing yours. And we're not fighting all the time. So that was that. So, I know when to be quiet. For I don't do it anymore, but for years I wrote music and I wrote plenty of little protest songs, which, we used here in Danbury at various events. So I've done that. And yeah, bits and pieces.
Alice is proud. I know she is. Yes.
I hope so. God, I hope so. She deserved to be proud. She was something else. She was a force of nature. And
amazing.
Amazing. She was an amazing, amazing woman.
Absolutely.
I really, talking about her like this, I will tell you one other funny story. When we were in Washington, we were in Connecticut. She was going to Washington. It was Mother's Day. And she was going to march, they were going to do a protest in the National Cathedral for abortion rights. And my father was livid, he was the Catholic and she was not the Catholic. And so he was like, I hope you get arrested. And she said, well, if I do, I'm giving my name as Mrs. George Chapman. I was like, oh, good Lord. But even he came around,
Did he? Yeah.
He did. He was quite impressed with her various behaviors in the end. Took a while.
2 terms as a national treasurer of the National Organization for Women.
Yeah.
1 term I served with her as the vice president. So that was
a
period of time in my life, and I was so pleased to be a part of her life and she a part of mine at that time. It was wonderful.
Yeah, those were some great days.
Good memories.
Those were some great days.
Well, I'm so thankful that you were willing to tell your story and have it recorded for history, because
I appreciate it. This is, it's brought back all, I've started thinking it's brought back all sorts of stuff, so it's great.